So we are going to be recording this session. Only the audio recording is going to be happening. So I want to welcome everybody to tonight's webinar Hangout. And my name is Christopher Lowe, and nice to see you. We have Felipe Paiva and Gene Frankel joining us this evening as well. What I'm going to be asking you to do is, if you are dialing in by phone, if you can mute your phone, this will keep a little bit of the background noise and echo down to a minimum. And then, when you want to speak, you can unmute. And, we also have the chat window as something that you can use at any time during the session this evening. So just want to thank you all again for joining tonight's session. This is what we call a webinar hangout, which is a little bit different from other types of webinars. You may have participated in webinars in the past where you had somebody giving a presentation, there was a chance for Q&A. This is a little bit more of an informal gathering. And really the idea here is, on a monthly basis on the Team Coaching Zone, we're going to be having a webinar hangout. It's an opportunity to invite the guests who have been interviewed on the show to come have some informal conversation around the topic of team coaching, engage with you and hear what your questions are and comments, and really have more of an organic, informal type of conversation. And I think my sense is that this is an opportunity to really build culture and community around a topic which is really an exciting and emerging topic. Obviously, as long as human beings have been working in groups and working in teams, people have been helping teams become more effective, whether it's team building or team training or team facilitation. But really, with the advent of the field of coaching, I think a whole nother perspective has really come online now around thinking about coaching teams to accelerate their performance and development, and doing that a little bit less as an event-based type thing, like a team-building event, but more really over time. And that, I think, is in a way captures a bit of the spirit of team coaching. And so, the way I see team coaching is relatively new field, an emerging field, a subspecialty within the coaching field that builds on a lot of the great work we know that's been done in the coaching area, but really kind of extends that to beyond coaching an individual to looking at the team and the larger system. And so that's really the idea here. And so basically, we launched the Team Coaching Zone on January 15th, and since then, we've I think the 8th episode in the podcast series came out this week. It's a weekly podcast. That's sort of the centerpiece of the Team Coaching Zone. But really the idea is to, through a podcast and webinars and other events, really try to build more buzz and engage in a dialogue around this exciting topic. And so we've had more than 600 downloads on iTunes. I'll pop over here just a little bit of proof here. You can see the Team Coaching Zone. It's somewhere around, I think, number 35 ranked in the new and noteworthy in the business section of iTunes. And so, a lot of people are putting podcasts out, but the Team Coaching Zone is kind of, in the top 50 or so, which is good. I think getting that out there to this information out there. And, some podcasts have huge followings. Team coaching is obviously a niche topic, probably a topic that people aren't as familiar with, but we're really seeing a nice upline and trend of downloads. I'm having a lot of really great conversations with people behind the scenes on this topic, so I think it'll be exciting to see where this goes. So tonight, Felipe Paiva from Artisan Consultoria, he was in the key guest in episode number 4, and Gene Frankel was featured in episode number 5. 2 really great episodes. I got a lot of value from, and so excited that they were, willing to join this evening. Rachel Saporin, Dr. Saporin, in episode number 3 is teaching in a coaching program this evening, so couldn't attend. So she'll be joining us in future months. The next one will be on Wednesday, March 11th, and so we'll be, featuring other guests. Obviously, Felipe and Gene always welcome to come and join those sessions as well. We actually have somebody on the line today, Jane Abitanta, who's going to be the feature of episode number 10 next week. And so a little bit about Jane. She does work in high finance with hedge funds and, in financial institutions, and has really brought a way of doing team coaching in that industry. So a little plug for Jane's episode next week. So what I thought I would do to kick off tonight's session, again, this is an informal chat. At any time you want to ask a question, make a comment, pop a comment into the chat window. That can be going live at any time. And then, we'll definitely unmute you if you want to come on and join in the discussion. So I thought as a way of kicking off the conversation tonight, I could share a little bit about what I learned personally from both Felipe's session and from Gene's session. I found both of those episodes really helpful. I'm doing some work with a number of teams and doing some team coaching engagements, and found both of what you offered in the podcast really helpful. And this is something I'm hearing from many of the listeners, is that they're actually getting really stimulated by the thinking that's being shared in the podcast. I was just on a call today with somebody who was really excited about the lessons learned. He's a team coach, and he may be actually a guest on a future episode where he coaches family owners of businesses, and also when businesses are being passed down by families over multiple generations, the handoff across generations and coaching teams around that. And by listening to the podcast, he said in particular, the lessons learned around the cases were really helpful for him, and he picked up really great ideas. So anyways, just to get the ball rolling this evening, I wanted to talk a little bit just about both Felipe and Gene's episodes, and maybe that'll spark some thoughts from both Felipe and Gene as well, and also from all of you, and then we can open it up to more open question and dialogue and interaction. So Felipe, in your episode in number 4, you shared a couple of really great examples. I think you talked about team coaching in an oil and gas company. You also talked about one in a fast-moving consumer goods company. And towards the end of the episode, we were joking that team coaching is like riding a wave, and if you hit it right, it can be a really exhilarating experience. And so, anyways, we label your episode, surfing the wave of team coaching. Fits really well. You're based out in Rio and living the lifestyle there. You're right, living the dream in Rio de Janeiro. But specifically, there was a couple things that came out of your episode that really have helped me a lot. One was there were really two influences you talked about. One was Heifetz's work on adaptive leadership, and this idea that many of the problems leaders and teams are facing now are not technical problems that can be solved through technical thinking, but they're really more adaptive problems that require innovative solutions where the answer and the way forward isn't clear. And so a lot of the challenges organizations and companies are facing are really more adaptive problems, and this requires collective thinking, collective leadership, and team responses. And that became really helpful for me, which links up a little bit to the work that Gene does. I'm working with a team in higher education. And one of the things about higher education is they're really facing a crisis of declining enrollment. So students are not, signing up like they didn't pass tuition, and, revenue is decreasing. And the business model is really being challenged. And, this is a problem. So when I was working with 25 people in one of the schools recently, we talked about, were the problems they facing technical problems or really more adaptive problems? And it really stimulated an interesting conversation that what has been gotten them to where they are now in terms of their success is probably not going to be the same set of competencies that are really going to take them into the future. And, they may really, in 10 years, move from being a real well-known prestigious school to being relegated to a small department in that university. So, this idea of adaptive problems versus technical was a big one. Also, towards the end of your episode, Felipe, one of the things you spoke about was really team coaching, moving beyond just helping teams accelerate their development and performance, but really team coaching as a vehicle for facilitating organizational change. And one of the influences you spoke about was Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy's work on the immunity to change. And that's actually a interesting book that's been coming up in the other episodes. So there's something about really digging into the process of change that Keegan and Leahy have really tapped into. I've actually read the book now, and I've really found that helpful to have a framework, which is interesting that not a lot has really been written about the sort of intricate phases that groups and individuals go through in the change process. There's a lot about the outcomes of change and what people do to try to facilitate change, but really what goes on psychologically in groups and in individuals that really can help facilitate change. So, those have been really two big takeaways for me in my recent work working with teams. I want to, really thank you for that value there. Before I pop over to Gene's, talking a little bit about Gene's episode, anything trigger there for you, Felipe or Gene, just around what I've already brought up? Or
I would say that the Immunity Change book is terrific, and I think the concept of adaptive change rather than technical change is absolutely fascinating. And
Mm.
in the case of the university team that I've been working with, it's really around a different mindset. It's not really around technical skills. It's around being able to look more broadly and be able to just sort of think of things in a different way. And especially in an organization like a university where a lot of folks have been there for a long time, the idea of thinking in a different way is scary. It's so that I love Felipe's allusion to adaptive change and
Mm.
sort of managing change, which is kind of an oxymoron, right? But helping people through the concept of needing to think and behave differently inside a changing system. You agree, Felipe?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jen, what you've said, because sometimes people do not understand the difference of being a coach and a consultant.
Yes.
And for example, I am a consultant,
Me too.
and I also do coaching.
Yep.
And when you arrive into this space, which is the team space, the team may see you as a consultant that is there to provide some solutions.
Yes.
And then when you come up with a process that it's open, that they have to engage and build the solution, it's kind of hard for these people because they're always fighting. They always try to put you in the role of the consultant.
Yes.
Bring us the solution, please. Yeah.
And I have this saying that I don't want to be, even if I am a consultant, I want to use a coach-like mode of helping people and groups find their own solutions. And what I say is that I don't want to be the stranger with a briefcase, right? That's what consultants are looked at. And to me, my approach to to consulting is not to say this is the answer, but to help them think of ideas. And sometimes you may have something to share, but if they don't own it at the end of the day, none of us have been successful. So I agree with you.
I see, Jane, you were wondering here about the name of the books. I think it was The Immunity to Change by Keegan and Leahy, something that you'll hear about in Felipe's episode. And then the other book was by Heifetz. What is the name of the title there? It's on adaptive leadership or leadership on the line.
The Adaptive Leadership Handbook, which is very practical, but it's based on his previous work that is Leadership on the Line.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to put these two in the chat window here. Actually, on the resources page of the podcast of the Team Coaching Zone website, I've been sort of building a library of all the books and resources that people have been mentioning on the episode, so you'll be able to find that there as well. Did you want to say something there, Felipe? Or?
I'll get the correct name of the book.
Okay. I actually, I think I've, when you mentioned it in the episode, I captured it and I put a link to it in the resources part of the Team Coaching Zone website, so people can find it there. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it looks like also other comments here. Just scrolling through, Jean said agreed. She spent a lot of time up front on role in her work. So okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
So just I'm going to make another comment. Just in listening to your episode, Jean. Obviously, because I have a client, your episode really turned out to be perfect timing. You talk in your episode about working with professional associations and boards, and one of your first clients, it sounds like, was the International Coaching Federation.
Mm-hmm.
And which is interesting because this Thursday we have a really great episode coming out with one of the founding members of the International Coaching Federation. Her name is DJ Mitch, and she has a really amazing story of doing team coaching on a large scale in Sanofi Pharmaceuticals with 60 teams and scaling team coaching to drive organizational change. It's a really great study. But anyways, you talked about how you were coaching the ICF on their board and how through that experience that really got you interested in coaching because you didn't know much about coaching until you actually had a coaching professional association as a client, and that really led to you getting into coaching. But I think what really stuck out, not only those stories about coaching professional boards, but you had this really great story of talking about coaching a university, and both the president of a university and a dozen or 14 or 15 vice presidents, and really how doing both one-on-one coaching for each leader, but then coaching the group as a collective really was something very powerful. And I know we had an offline conversation around, can you maintain your role in terms of how do you coach all of these individual leaders as an individual, but then also be able to coach the group and the team as a whole as a client. And anyways, that had a lot of impact on me, because now I find myself in a team coaching engagement where I'm working with the team as a whole and then a larger system, but also now doing one-on-one coaching and what we would call partnership coaching with a couple of the senior leaders who are having interesting dynamics.
I'm doing that too.
Okay, cool. As you know, in higher ed, you have a lot of different power centers. The administration has a certain amount of power, but the faculty have a lot of power as well. And so aside from the other leaders in the team, sort of bridging those sort of power centers is kind of an interesting dynamic. But anyways, your episode really inspired me around that. And I know we had an interesting offline conversation around maintaining your role when you're privy to confidential information about each individual leader, but then also trying to be able to coach the group of leaders as a whole. So that was something that stuck out for me a lot. That you can do that, and maybe at times you need to seek some colleagues to help bounce ideas off or for supervision. And so, anyways, that was something that has really helped me in my practice.
Well, thanks, and it continues to be sort of a fascinating dynamic, because on one level you need to be very good at compartmentalizing and very good at, I find that the really deep listening skills that I was able to develop as part of my coach training, I think it has helped that a lot, because when I'm with somebody, I'm sort of in the moment and I'm listening to them. But at the same time, I think one of the interesting dynamics of coaching multiple people on the same team is that you can begin to identify patterns, you can begin to identify themes, and you can, and Felipe, right, this is where we blend our consulting and our coaching roles. You can begin to sort of test some things with folks, and you can do it anonymously, but you can say, well, some of your colleagues, are saying this, and what do we think about that, or whatever it may be, and so subtly, you also have the ability, and it needs to be used carefully, but it can be very powerful, of beginning to help an organization really manage through change and really begin to sort of help move ideas through a system. So it's a really challenging but potentially very powerful dynamic. And so I'm finding that very interesting right now. And then the other dynamic is that when you are operating under the sponsorship of the organizational sponsor, in this case the president, the president has their own perspectives about the kinds of things they'd like to see the team do. So the team coaching piece there is, how do you balance what they need as individuals, what you're hearing from them, where they need to change. And Krista, I would say what's going on in higher ed is the business models are changing. In some ways enrollments are up, in some ways demand is up, but I think higher ed is going to look very different years from now. There may be an awful lot of it happening in platforms just like this one, and not classrooms, and so I think that requires a lot of change. But the idea is, you've got to balance all of that with then, sort of helping a system move forward together, which I think can be an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
Felipe, have you had that experience?
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I believe in that case, immunity to change is a very interesting tool.
Yes.
Because it helps the group to surface their fears and their anxiety around some of the themes, things that people fear losing. Losing power, losing identity, losing their influence, or losing resources and whatever. But when you get people to talk about what really matters, then the group moves on, because you start talking about what really counts.
Felipe, one of the things I remember about that work is that it bases a lot of the conversation on sort of unspoken assumptions that people have had, correct?
It's very simple. It's a very simple way of working. First thing is to say, what do we want to achieve collectively? What do we want to? What kind of results do we want to create collectively? And first getting them to agree on what they want to do collectively. And then you move on in terms of saying, okay, what are the things that you do or not do that works counter to your objectives?
Yeah.
So it's kind of liberating because they start telling, oh yeah, we do this and we do that.
You know what I like about that? I like about that the idea that they are helping to define for themselves what success looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think in a lot of team efforts and a lot of efforts just in general, it's not always clear what the end game looks like. And I love that this causes them to sort of have ownership to it from the beginning, right?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. I was working with a team that they used to, there were two teams working together on something that was collective. And so both teams had budgets.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did is that each team had a buffer in their budgets, which they did not tell the others that they had this buffer. Why were they doing this? Because they felt that if they didn't have the buffer, they would be caught in an awkward situation. So in order to keep control and keep them stabilized, they were working with the buffers. But these budget buffers created a lot of problems for them. But I think their fear of dealing with the real thing was much higher than the hassle of dealing with the budget buffers.
Yeah.
So what we did is that we definitely discussed these budget buffers, and then we discussed what they were fearing about that, and then we came to these, what we said, the hidden commitments.
Hey, Felipe, how hard is it in doing that kind of work to get them to have the level of trust necessary to really be open about their fears and things? I mean, how do you get past that? How have you done that?
Very good question, Jane. The first thing starts with the team leader, and how he or she position himself or herself in the team. If he comes with a more open mind and open heart, things will follow through in a better way. If the person doesn't do it, then it's quite impossible to get there.
Actually,
so it starts with the team leader.
Yeah, the this week's featured episode on the Team Coaching Zone is by Greg Burns, who you all may know, also a graduate of Columbia's coaching certification program. And he was the first chief learning officer at Citigroup and had his own practice the last 5 years. And so one of the things he talks about in his episode really strikes on what you guys are just now talking about, which is in order to really, what he talks about is a lot of the executives he's working with are in a foxhole mentality, that they're sort of just trying to survive. And in order to lead teams and to really get a team to do adaptive work, it requires kind of a selfless type of leadership, but the mode that they're necessarily in is not really suited for that. So one of the things he's been trying to do is really work with the leader to really make them get very centered and beyond themselves, to satisfy the need to hold them, take care of them, get them really sort of ready so that when they show up with the team, they can really lead and put the team more in a selfless way, really put the team first. But so he's finding he's having to do a lot of prep work with the leader, given the threat that they're under in the foxhole mentality, to get them out of the foxhole when they do the team session in order to show up to be able to lead in a way that really brings people together,
Christopher, I try to have at least 3 coaching sessions with the team leader prior to the group activity.
Yeah.
Because I understand exactly this. If the person is not ready to be open to the system, it's too hard to get into the right direction with the team.
Yeah. It's interesting, out of the 8 or 9 episodes that have come out so far, if there's one big sort of pattern that's emerging is when team coaching isn't working or gets stuck, it almost 9 times out of 10 is revolving around the leader in some way. They're not ready. they're not ready for change. They're just personally not, have been prepared well, or they haven't had one-on-one coaching before, and it's just overwhelming. There's been a couple of cases where the leader's been ready, but the team hasn't been ready. So, but more often than not, it's been the other way, where it's something about the team leader has been the real obstacle. So, interesting, I think, lesson learned there around really that prep work with the leader, up front. I know in your episode, Felipe, you had a relationship with one of the leaders, and so you didn't have that, and maybe you didn't have the opportunity to do that. Cool. So I just want to give the listeners also a chance to jump in here. Any sort of comments you want to get your voice in, ask questions of Felipe and Jean, anything that triggered any thoughts or follow-up questions, feel free in the chat window, or if you want to unmute and come on line. Says Sandra Hayes says here, Jean mentioned deep listening as being critical to team coaching, and they both said how difficult it can be to navigate roles. My experience is that team coaching does require great agility on the part of the coach. What else does it take to go really engage effectively as a team coach?
Hi, this is Evelyn Rodstein. Some of the team coaching experiences that I've been working with are working with a company over several years. And a lot of it has to do with the changes in strategy and the change of the kind of company it's becoming. And we can get lost in a lot of the kind of interpersonal dynamics. But a lot of these changes have to do with, for instance, I have one company where the founder originally was very, very involved in the business, and then he had to pull back, and then he had to create a strong enough team that could work with him less involved, and then they had to reach a point where the founder could move away and the team could be independent. And so you're working through different phases of a company's life cycle. Or you're working with a university. I've been working with the university, and I agree with the lady who talked about so much of it is strategic change in the university. It has very little to do with interpersonal change, but with the fact that the strategy is going through secular change in higher education, and they have to really make very difficult choices. So I think the podcasts are wonderful because it's when you do this kind of work, it's like clinical supervision. And before I was a head of leadership, I was a therapist, and I remember those good old days of clinical supervision. So I think the podcasts are wonderful. But I think we can't get lost in these interpersonal dynamics. We have to remember that the company is going through different phases, and that's an incredible power in team coaching if you can stay with it.
That's really helpful. Evelyn, just before you go, I know, Evelyn, we've had some conversation offline. You sort of done a lot of work internally in a leadership role and doing team coaching from an internal perspective, and now you've transitioned outside to doing team coaching as an external. Can you share a little bit about that, doing it from the two different roles? I think most of us tend to be externals, but I know, Felipe, you had some background as an executive before you transitioned over, but it might be interesting for you, Evelyn, to share a little bit about what it was like being in both of those roles, trying to do team coaching.
Well, when you're internal, I was head of leadership and talent at 5 different global Fortune 100 companies and a Big 4 professional service firm and an entrepreneurial privately held company. And so when you're working with those teams every day, it is sort of a form of team coaching because you're in the system and you're out of the system at the same time. And you're sort of moving the team along the same strategic change agenda, but it's over a lot of time. The difficulty is you're so in the system that people don't always listen to you. It's like if you're outside and you're coming in as a consultant, they don't listen to you for different reasons than when they don't listen to you when you're internal.
Can I add to that? That is really true. It's very hard to maintain the balance between being an outsider and being inside the system, right? And still maintaining your credibility on both ends. That is a really, really difficult thing to do. And can I also tell you that I totally agree with what you said about sort of the changing strategies and dynamics. You can't do team coaching in a vacuum just focusing on all of the interpersonal and behavioral things. You need to tie it to the the work and the goal set that the team is engaged in. So somebody asked a question earlier on the chat about what makes a good team coach in addition to sort of deep listening and agility. I think it's also having enough of a sense of the work of the strategy. You don't have to be an expert in strategy, but helping the team sort of get beyond themselves a bit. Because I think one of the dynamics that maybe Felipe has seen that can be tough is once the floodgates open and people start sort of emoting and feeling about these things, sometimes it's hard to focus them back outward to say, okay, folks, you're trying to be an effective team in order to do something.
Yeah.
And it should be the team leader's role to do that, but I think that's an important thing that a coach can do as well. What do you all think?
Jane, this is Jane Abatanta. Oh, sorry, Philippe.
Go ahead,
this is Jane Abatanta, and I totally agree with you. I think I see this time and time again, and it's really challenging because I find the leader starts to try and co-opt me as the coach.
Right.
I mean, we're all trying to deal with that, but
right.
Still. And so we have to get back to the role conversation and then the goal conversation. But I'm interested to hear what to capitalize on something else you were saying. What about this idea of needing to basically understand the strategy? My field is I'm very targeted, and I understand what my clients do and what their business is. So I'm more of I can be a content expert. Do you think that's helpful? Do you think what's your experience?
Well, let me throw this out and see what people think. I've been coaching for a number of years, but beyond that, as probably Felipe has as well, I've been consulting for about 20 years, and my primary clients have been a whole variety of trade and professional associations and cause-related organizations. And I'm not an expert in any of their areas of interest or study. But what really, jazzes me is when, I'll finish the session and someone says, "Oh my gosh, you should be an honorary member of our organization. You know so much about us." And I don't know anything about them, but I'm just a good listener. And I think so. Part of it is sort of listening, playing back, rephrasing. Getting yourself, sort of as deeply into the moment as you can. It's a language, that folks speak, and you don't have to be an expert. And quite honestly, you shouldn't be an expert, I think, because it can bias you. It's the same challenge that an executive director, for example, has who has come from an industry or profession. They substitute their own judgment for the judgment of their board. And I think, coaches and consultants can have the same danger. You've got to be broad enough, just have enough sort of sensitivity and understanding of their strategy area to be helpful in terms of letting them move forward. But you don't necessarily have to be an expert. What do other folks think about that? I'm curious.
Jane, I believe.
Ethan Hanbury. Hello?
Felipe? Yeah.
Yes, I
Ethan
believe.
Hanbury here.
Hold on, Ethan wants to jump in. Go ahead, Ethan.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah. I have been mostly doing individual coaching. I did do my first team session about a year ago. And I from that experience, I think the most important thing is as what was shared previously was having the relationship with the leader and having spent some time in advance talking about how the session would go and really getting to know that person and what the team is like. I would agree that one can learn enough about the area or the industry or what they're talking about to be able to be very effective. But I think the most important thing is to having really a good knowledge of the leader and or his team.
One question that I've found to be very helpful in doing this is you want to know what success would look like. And what do they think success would look like? And part of that success would be a team where we have constructive debate and all these wonderful interpersonal rules of engagement. But also, when you ask them what success would look like, you get a very different lens on what they mean for the business. For one person, it might be that marketing is up, production is up, and we're selling to everybody. For another, it might be we're really closing down and only doing a few innovative products. So it's very hard to do team coaching if you don't know what each person thinks is the success of the team and the success of the company.
Yeah, Ellen, I love that. I love that. You know, I did a survey with this team in a university that I'm coaching right now. I did the survey before I even met them. I did a web survey. And I asked them some things like that. I said, what would success should this team look like? And, you know, I started out with an interesting question. I don't know if you'll have used maybe just in one-on-one coaching, but I said, what's it like to be you? You know, what's it like to be you these days? You know, and some people answered with their stressors, and some people answered with their projects, and, you know, all over the place. But then, you know, you take that with, what's each person's definition of success? And that's, you know, after all, part of helping a team move forward is having them a common definition of success. Felipe, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I believe it's fundamental to understand the business and the strategy and what the leadership is accountable for. Because in the end of the day, you're coaching a team that is in a larger system. And the larger system has its objectives. If you are coaching in the oil and gas industry and you don't understand why the oil price is $50 and how it impacts the industry,
yeah.
You
have to do your homework, don't you?
If the team is not concerned with costs, and if it's not concerned about efficiency, when the oil is 50, and you don't understand that, I think you are a coach without credibility.
Yes.
So in order for you to be a credible coach and work with the team, you have to understand what's important for that context. So understanding strategy is a key thing for someone that wants to work in the business environment. And if you're not in the business and you're working with the family, okay, you have to understand the family context. You always have to spend some time to understand the context. If not, you're working blinded.
I totally agree. I totally agree, Felipe. That's my story too. It's Jane. I think it's the key to credibility. At least it is with my audience.
So if you're working with a family company, you have to understand who is family, who has property, who is family property and management. Because you may have people that are family and have property, but they're not in management. You may have people from the family, but they don't have property, and they are in management. You have to understand the system. If you don't understand the system, you are kind of blinded, and you run a big risk of failure.
I agree. I mean, you have to do your homework. You can't just show up. You have to read. You have to, absorb as much as possible. But it's interesting. I think that part of that, going back to what skills and competencies, make a good coach in this area, it's the ability to be able to absorb information and to learn and to build those critical learning skills to be able to to go deep enough into an industry that may not be your own native, and to be able to help a group through. You have to understand context, as you said, and have to be able to help raise the right questions and understand the dynamic that's going on from a content standpoint as well as a group process standpoint, right?
Yeah, I was working with this team from the oil and gas industry too. They are based in Brazil, but they are part of this large international organization. And then the CEO in Europe changed. They got a new CEO, and this new CEO was the CEO of another oil company, which I spent some time to understand what he did in that other oil company.
Yes.
Because I thought that was important, and I could see that, and now I can see that he's pretty much doing the same agenda, and so I can help the team work through their difficult times.
Interesting. This this week on Thursday, when the new podcast episode comes out, this is the story of the coaching the 60 teams. So 25% of the teams in this pharmaceutical company, and so that group, they brought in, a whole bunch of people in their company do team coaching. So they've been trained in a sort of a methodology. but then each coach partnered with an internal change agent who wasn't a member of that team but was part of that organization, and they actually did the coaching in pairs, one internal and one external. And it didn't mean that the team external coach didn't need to learn the language and the lingo of the pharmaceutical company, but they weren't experts in pharma, and they were able to sort of deal with that by partnering with an internal. So, I think this issue of credibility and how much expertise you need to have, that's been a huge debate in consulting for decades. We probably won't reconcile that one tonight. And I think there's interesting, it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, on one side, if you have that expertise, it for sure helps. On the other hand, it can lead to bias as well, right? So there may not be a simple, easy answer on that one. So let's see. So Sandra, you had said there for you, I guess that the idea about the credibility really resonated. So there are different ways to build credibility with your audience, and Jane, sort of, that seems like to be resonating with Jane as well. Okay, other thoughts or interactions people want to get in and comment on?
Krister, can I say something?
Please.
Going back to this question about, it was Sandra's question about what makes, what else does it take to really effectively engage as a team coach? This may just be an absolute, DAW answer, but I just think that, really good facilitation skills are really important. And I say that because I happen to believe facilitation skills are one of the least, valued leadership skills. And in a lot of the team coaching that I am doing, I am modeling things in facilitation that I believe that effective teams need to do. Whether it's, it's not just about listening, it's about rephrasing, it's about asking good questions. It's about, just something as simple as sort of managing time and space and dynamics. And, too often a team will leave that to a leader, to manage ground rules, and other things. And we all know this really engaged team, self-manages. And so one of the things I try to do as a team coach is to help model, this facilitative behavior and action and encourage it in all the team members. Do you agree, Felipe?
Yeah, totally. And facilitation is not just a science, but also an art.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I can see that my acting training that I had when I was a teenager, and some of my music training was important for the things that I do today.
It's all about timing and lighting, right?
I think Sandra wants to get in here. Sandra?
Go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah. Hi there. Yeah, I just wanted to say how much I agree with this idea of how facilitation skills are so critical when working with groups as a team coach. And this notion of asking really solid questions. I go back and forth about how critical it is to be a content expert. I mean, I'm really good at saying, I'm not in your world. I really don't quite understand quite the, all the aspects of your business, but I'm good at asking enough questions in order to build the credibility. And I'm in just being fully present with the client feels really important. So I just wanted to say how much I agree that having good, solid facilitation skills and being able to ask good, really take an inquiry mindset feels really important.
And Sandra, I know
you and I talked.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I know
Jane.
Sandra. Just wanted to comment on something Sandra said there. I know, Sandra, you have a background in action learning and have a doctorate in that. You've been a facilitator, and we've sort of spoke offline a little bit around, you never maybe called what you did team coaching, but I'm curious, I know a lot of the stuff you did was really you do a lot of collaborative inquiry and facilitation of action learning, and I'm curious that, how do you see that lining up with what we're talking about in terms of team coaching?
So actually, it brings lots to mind for me. One of the things I'm thinking a lot about is team learning, and how that aligns with the notion of team coaching. I'm a learning person, so I'm always thinking about how do I help the team to learn its way through whatever the challenges the team is facing. So learning is sort of at the bottom, at the foundation of my thinking, and I think in my work. So I think a lot of times, although I haven't called it coaching, that's what I've been doing, and this idea of bringing yourself, and I've taken some real heat sometimes in groups with people who were, because of the interpersonal dynamics, I began to be the focal point of that. And I think one of the things that's helped me ride that out as a coach and as a facilitator is understanding how group dynamics work, which is like a whole other thing. And again, just sometimes I become instructive and naming what it is that I see or am experiencing in the group, even as its coach, to be able to move things forward. So there are so many dynamics, and which is why I asked that question. I can't put my finger on any one thing, but there are just so many things that I think matter. I also have a background in adult learning and development, adult development, I should say, and so I think a lot about how much it takes as an individual to be able to hold all the complexity that can come with working with a group, and I'm always working on myself to be able to handle that complexity, and I haven't come up with any singular way of approaching all of this, but think being in a mode of continuous learning myself is one way to navigate all of this.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing there, Sandra. I know, Jane, I think I cut you off a little bit earlier. Did you want to say something?
You and I had a conversation, I think it was offline, about the idea of really having consultants and coaches get educated in the use of self as the instrument around facilitation, around group dynamics, and all that Sandra has just been talking about. And that's why I was asking the group, where do we recommend that people learn this? New coaches coming up, because I do think that that's just so critical.
I guess I was getting at the point that it feels so interdisciplinary that I chuckled at Felipe's point about being an actor and a musician, and listening to Eugene also talk about my sense is that you have lots of interests and you bring all of that to the work. And I think about one of the reasons I became a consultant is because I didn't want to work in any one place. I enjoy being able to learn many things and interact with people from all backgrounds, and so that this work helps me to do that. And it's challenging. So
yeah.
Hey, there are some things that you can do. For example, my partner and I, we went through this storytelling training, storytelling for kids. If you could tell stories to kids, you can adapt and tell good stories to adults too. So
exactly. I need to have some people who I'm interviewing take that training, because the heart of the podcast is about telling stories, and trying to get some people to try to get them to tell stories is like pulling teeth. But most people are pretty good at going at that. But something, Jane, you said earlier around how do people start to learn some of these skills, and in Felipe's episode at the end, I remember you talking about one way to get started on the journey to becoming a team coach is to start doing like team facilitation or team building retreats. And that's how I really got started. I mean, I started as a trainer, back in 2001, 2002. That's where I got experience. And then eventually I got to start doing retreats, and, in those, all the, training is a great set of basic platform skills. Obviously, team retreats and things are more dynamic. It's more facilitation, and there are all these whole set of skills, and it'll be interesting to see as the team coaching field evolves. I know there are some people now starting to offer certificate trainings. You'll hear that on some of the episodes coming up in future weeks of folks who actually are doing certificate training, like how are they actually approaching the multi-skilled nature of doing team coaching. Now, Felipe, you raised a question. I don't know if that's visible to everybody here, just around exploring whether teams are uncoachable or not. And I guess that's a loaded question. So I guess buried in your question, you have some thinking about that. You want to start us off on that?
I remember when we were going through Columbia coaching certification program. We had this questionnaire to check if the client was coachable or not. And I do believe that you have also to check if the team is coachable or not. For example, if the team wants to engage in the coaching work, because as I told you in the episode, if one of the flaws that I had working with teams was in an environment the team was too political. When especially in multinationals, where you have these matrix organizations and people report to different bosses. If they're reporting to a boss that is not as strong as the boss outside, they will they probably don't give much attention to the local team, and give more attention to the boss outside, and maybe these people will not engage really into the coaching work. So we have to check if there's conditions to go with the coaching work. For example, if the team leader is not into the work, why are you gonna do it?
You better walk away, run the other way, because you'll get yourself into some trouble, right? Yeah, this whole idea of coachability, I think, is really fascinating. And, I think, Felipe, I don't know if I think you mentioned it on your episode that one of the obstacles you have to get over is not taking the client on, even though you might make good money from that, which always can create a conflict of interest. Do you want to give up a lucrative assignment? But, the signal is there, and hopefully, if your practice is mature enough or you have enough integrity, you can resist that. But, in my case, in my episode 2, I talk about one of my stories of a miss where I think the team was ready to be coached and was game, but the leader was going through window dressing. And as we got into it, it just became clear, but the process was already underway, and it was really hard to hit the brakes at that point. And it turned out, at that point, it became damage control and just trying to do a soft landing for that leader. But I think I had some early warning signs that, to use Jane's expression, the instrument of myself was saying something doesn't feel right here. And, I just kind of ignored it, and it kept popping up a couple times. So I had enough warning signs, and, really learning to listen to that is it's a tough muscle, right, to really make strong.
So that's a big one, Krister. The learning to listen to ourselves and actually being able not only to call it out, but to convince ourselves that we need to do that. It can be really challenging when things get hot.
There are a few things that you can do. For example, who is calling you? Is HR? Is the people in the team? Is the team leader? If it's the team leader, that's a good start.
Or general counsel.
Or HR with the with the demand from the team leader. It's a good thing. If you go there and then the person is really team leader is really committed to the work, that's a good step too. The thing is when you find this environment where the team leader believes he or she needs to do work because HR is saying so.
If you listen to episode number 7, the issue is there, which is interesting, is the legal counsel, general counsel of the firm contacted the coach, which is always probably a warning. You got to be careful.
Ooh.
But
Did the president know?
But what gets revealed in that story, which is something I'm grappling with right now, is where you have varying levels of motivation among the leadership team. So some leaders are very motivated to engage in one-on-one coaching or team coaching, and some aren't. So that's something I'm grappling with, where there's varying levels of coaching motivation among the various. The senior leader, or the main team lead, is on board, but some of the other senior leaders have varying levels of coaching motivation.
I think
So how are you dealing with that?
I'm sorry. So there's a couple of comments coming in. So let's go with Evelyn first, then I think Jane, and then it looks like Ethan is popping off here. Thanks for joining, Ethan. Great to have you here.
I think this is where you go back to the business goal. I did a team coaching with the CEO of a hospital and her direct reports. We did 360 for each of her direct reports, and then we were on this journey together for a year, having periodic offsites. And not every member of that team was engaged in their own development, but they were all engaged in the strategic issues the hospital was facing.
Right.
Because if marketing wasn't speaking to clinical, they were taking in patients they couldn't treat. There were all sorts of, I'm not talking about big picture strategy a la Harvard Business School. I'm talking about executional strategy, which everybody was involved in. So some of the people in the team were not agile learners, were not insightful, were not emotionally intelligent, and the 360 feedback that they had very little impact. But they were all engaged. Some were very involved and very engaged in learners. But what they were all involved in was making the hospital more effective and not having as many malpractice suits. So that's why I think really being clear about what success looks like, and with a strategy with a capital S, but not a huge SIE. We're not talking Michael Porter here.
Right.
Is but a small S perhaps is really important because that's what they all engage in.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think in episode 7, one of the ways we grapple with that, my colleague actually called me for a consult because he was finding it really challenging, and we wound up coming up with, they were doing 360 with each of the leaders, and we came up with a strategy. Some of them decided to go for the deep dive and really dig into their 360. Others just did a short 45-minute one-shot session, pulled out 1 or 2 strengths, 1 or 2 areas of development, and that was it. And then one person opted for a self-coaching. There's a little bit of research that says that if you get 360 feedback and you just read it over, it actually can have some positive effect. And so he laid out 3 options, and the leadership team took they all took different choices, but in the end, it actually really worked out well. And some of the people who had initially been resisting switched over and wanted to go for the deep dive and go for the ongoing coaching. So I think this idea of coachability is really fascinating, but I think your point's really well taken, Evelyn, that maybe they don't all need to have the same level of motivation. If you can keep success for the team or what the team's goal or adaptive challenges in mind, that may be enough to kind of, keep the pieces together.
Exactly.
And Krister, sometimes the dialogue is difficult. So what you can do is to engage people into some work together, right, which then they can get back to the group and relate about this work. So you create a common basis to talk about, instead of being very conceptual or judgmental or something like this, Well,
I think that's, going back to group dynamics, is when process is becoming an obstacle, switch over to task, and then, switch the subject. I mean, this is one of the big things I learned in mediating groups in conflict resolution, is that when you feel like your wheels are spinning, change the conversation, just switch topic, get off topic, and then you cover some ground on a different topic, and then you may be able to come back to that other topic where you were spinning wheels, and now they're ready, and you can get traction.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we're just coming down to the end here. I want to see if there's any sort of final reflections or thoughts, any other sort of burning things we want to get out this evening. But you can see an hour goes by pretty quickly once we get chatting, but wasn't easy. It wasn't too hard to get you guys all talking, so it's a nice group this evening. Any other sort of thoughts or comments people would like to get in here before we start to get into the final closing thoughts? All right. Well, it seems like that we may have run our course here. This was, intended to be a light hour, even though I think there's some neat points. And I think one of the highlights for me was this whole discussion around coachability. And I have a couple of episodes coming up, I think 3 or 4 down the line, where that's a hot topic in one of our, interviews, is really this whole idea of coachability and how do you assess coachability up front. In Greg Burns' episode that's featured this week, he talks a little bit about that, and where actually a venture capital firm who had 51% stake in the company hired Greg to coach the CEO who was having some difficulty, and warned him up front that we're questioning whether this CEO is coachable or not. And anyways, this creates an interesting dilemma, and I think there's some good learning in that, listening to Greg's how he navigated that, for better or for worse. And so anyways, I think there's some good lessons around that. So that for me was one of the takeaways from tonight's discussion. I'll throw out there as a closing comment for me. Jean, Felipe, any sort of closing thoughts from each of you? And then, we can wrap up the session. Any closing thoughts? And just want to thank you both for coming. You've been real pioneers, being early on in the podcast episodes. So you've been real champions there. Tonight was the second webinar I've run since launching this initiative. So thank you again for being pioneers. The webinars to come will stand on your your giants, the shoulders of the giants, they say, right? So really appreciate.
I want to thank you, Krister, for organizing this. I very much enjoyed the conversation, Felipe. It was an honor to serve with you, and I really enjoyed our conversation. And thanks to everyone who participated as well.
Thanks, Krister. I think you're doing an amazing contribution to the coaching field because it's a difficult topic to talk about. There's not much reference in the market, and I believe the community needs it, and they are fulfilling this need. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and for all the people that are up till now.
Exactly. Especially for those of you who are a few hours ahead of us down in Brazil. So kudos to you guys. Congratulations. Good job for coming. And Jane, we're looking forward to having your episode, not this week, but next week. Jane's episode will be coming out. So lovely having you on the call. And everyone, thank you again for coming. Our next webinar is going to be on March 11th. It's a Wednesday. Same time, I'll be sending out invites, and you're welcome to come back, pass the word on, and enjoy the podcast. Really open to your suggestions and ideas as well. So feel free to shoot me emails or comments. I'll just pop that in here in the chat window. Krister@teamcoachingzone.com is the best way to reach me. And I think with that, everybody, have a great evening wherever you are, and we'll hope to see you soon.